while back, I had a revelation that I needed to work on a certain point. And in painting in Blender, your palettes are something that you can save. You can even save a curve stroke as a data block. But when you're working with gradients, so here I'm working with a palette, and you can see I can pick and choose the colors, put them down side by side as individual strokes. But a very utilitarian, a very cool feature is using a gradient. So in the brush you have a gradient color, and you can set your stops to be whatever you want. So here I'm using the tetratic palette from that first color, and I've set the stops, and I've got something functional. Now when you use that with the pressure, you might have to actually adjust the stops on the very first stop to get it to where your pressure will allow you to get that last color. But it's easier sometimes to do very nice transitions, especially if you're using black and white, to get different gray transitions for stenciling. And I'm showing you the palettes. The palettes in like Illustrator or Photoshop, you have the ability to save these gradients. And we don't have that in Blender. It's an oversight from I guess a little bit of lack of attention on the paint tools, because everything's been busy trying to fix all the things with Sculpt and the things that actually make the big money. So here I am setting a second brush with another gradient, and I'm just demonstrating the fact that once you do set up the second gradient and use it, if you want to go back to the other gradient, that's too bad, because that's sharing the same gradient. All the brushes are going to share that same gradient. So a while back, a couple years, I think it's closer to like maybe 6 years ago, I started using the ColorRamp converter node, because it was basically the same thing. It can copy Control C and Control V for copy and paste. You can save your gradient from the brush into one of those. You don't connect it to anything, and to save it you have to kind of keep it in the shader you're working in. So for right now I've got them actually in the compositor, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But right here you can see that when you have the node selected, you can see the stuff on the side over there. So I may end up changing it to put it into the shader. I don't know. But I'm just showing you that in the paint tab, you can turn on that color palette add-on. It's a really fancy thing. So I wrote a utility add-on called Gradient2ColorRamp, because instead of trying to do the manual copy and paste into making new color ramp nodes and to save them, I wanted to automate it as much as possible. So without me being a real Blender dev, but as good as I've got to offer. So I've opened up the compositor and hit new, and right now I can Control C, Control V right there from the tool panel to the paint panel. And you can then see I decided to go back to the other one, Control C from there to then paste into the new one. And you'll see that they're actually named and numbered, 1 and 2. You can add another one. Any change you do there is going to affect whatever's in the node that's actually existing in the compositor. So I've swapped the stops, and you see it swapped on the one in there. and not on the ones in the shader editor. Shader editor is not connected to it. It's going through the compositor. But for right now, I go back in. I'm playing with it a little bit, and trying to show you that you kind of pull that first stop in, because pressure-wise, the light pressure just doesn't pick it up. So I reset my image, and I decided I think I'm going to set you up with an example of a couple of layers of images with a stencil in between. Now this one is my brush breaking clouds. You can find it on Blend Swap. Though I'm gonna have to try to figure out a way to put these up, and maybe I'll get links later for the rest of the brushes I've got, once I can do a proper video on all the brushes I've been working on. Now that option that you see there, what that is in my draw to paint, there's an option for creating a new image texture node based on the previous texture node, so that way it's the same size. And so once I've got it selected, I go ahead and get it together to examine it on slot to display to make sure what it is, and I can make changes on the image tab to what the image is color wise. I'm gonna get it like a safety paint yellow kind of looking. Then I need to make a stencil, so I do the same thing again, selecting the node, then making a new node from that size, and I run that into the mix. Now they've changed the way the behavior is in 4.2. Instead of being a black image being a stencil between, you need to start with a white image. And I guess they're trying to make it more consistent with using layer masks in Photoshop and GIMP, where you would have a white image and then paint black into it, which is just means I have to go back to remembering that once in a while when I'm setting these up. So we're gonna paint on the stencil with the breaking clouds, and then you'll see the black image from inside. So that's one use of a gradient with an alternate stencil mask brush. I decided to switch to that first dark image, and I'm going to add some color to it just so we can see the color come through. At this point, I decided to go ahead and load up the other gradient and try to mix that in with some texture. This brush is using a different pattern to give me some sort of almost like a skin layer. One of the main things though is that this kind of painting, you're working on something like with a hard surface, you benefit a lot if you go up there and you turn on that cavity mask, so that way it has a better believable mix, or across edges. And I think I decided to go ahead and just recolor that underneath. decided to add a little bit of a bump. So I don't know if you know about that. If you drag out that output to go, it'll let you search for the right kind of node instead of trying to do a Shift A add. It makes it a little faster. Bump up the metalness and turn down the roughness and kind of get a little bit more of a shiny thing going on. This isn't a proper setup at all. I mean, there's so many things that need to happen to make this more realistic. But I just wanted to show a little bit more emphasis to what was going on with the mask. And then so also, if you saw that there, in order to delete one of the color ramps, you need to press that lock to open it up, and then you press remove it. Okay guys, have fun. Remember ART equals FUN. Get in there and do some painting.